Maya Rodriguez walked into the training facility with steady steps, her boots echoing against the concrete floor. The Naval Special Warfare Command Center buzzed with activity, but she felt the weight of dozens of eyes following her movement. Word had spread quickly through the base about the new contractor who claimed she could outperform their best operatives in combat simulation. Commander Jake Morrison stood with his arms crossed, watching this woman who barely reached 5 feet 6 inches approach their group. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore standard tactical gear that seemed too clean, too new. Behind him, his team of elite SEALs whispered among themselves, some chuckling at what they saw as another overconfident civilian trying to prove something. "You must be Rodriguez," Morrison said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had led men through the deadliest missions imaginable. "I have to say, your reputation precedes you, though some of my men find your claims rather hard to believe." Maya nodded respectfully. "Commander Morrison, thank you for agreeing to this evaluation. I understand your skepticism." Lieutenant Harris, a mountain of a man with scars running down his left cheek, stepped forward. "Ma'am, with all due respect, we've been doing this for over a decade. We've seen contractors come and go, and most of them can talk a good game until the bullets start flying. What makes you think you can teach us anything?" The room fell silent. Maya looked around at the faces surrounding her, reading the mixture of curiosity and doubt in their expressions. She had expected this reaction. In her 15 years of private military work, she had faced the same challenge countless times. Special Forces units were tight-knit families, and outsiders, especially female outsiders, had to prove themselves twice as hard to earn even basic respect. "I don't expect to teach you anything, Lieutenant," Maya replied calmly. "I'm here because your commanding officers believe I might be able to contribute something valuable to your upcoming mission in Southeast Asia. The terrain there is unlike anything most American forces have dealt with, but I spent 3 years working those jungles with local resistance fighters." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Working with resistance fighters? Your file says you were a consultant for government contractors." Maya's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her dark eyes. "My file says a lot of things, Commander. Not all of them tell the complete story." Sergeant Peterson, the team's communications specialist, spoke up from the back. "So what exactly are you proposing? That we just take your word for it?" "No," Maya said, turning to face the entire group. "I'm proposing that you test me. Put me through whatever evaluation you think is appropriate. If I can't demonstrate my capabilities to your satisfaction, I'll walk away and recommend that your superiors find someone else for this job." The SEALs exchanged glances. Morrison studied her for a long moment. There was something about her demeanor that didn't match her appearance. She stood with the relaxed confidence of someone who had faced real danger, not the nervous energy of someone trying to prove something. "All right, Rodriguez," Morrison said finally. "We'll do this properly. Full combat simulation, live ammunition exercises, hand-to-hand combat evaluation, and tactical planning assessment. You'll go up against some of our best operators. If you're as good as you claim, you should have no problem." Maya nodded. "When do we start?" "Right now," Harris said with a grin that wasn't entirely friendly. "Hope you're ready to get dirty." The first test took place in the facility's Urban Warfare Simulation Center, a complex maze of rooms and corridors designed to replicate real combat environments. Maya was given standard gear and placed at one end of the course, while 4 SEALs took positions throughout the facility. Her objective was simple: reach the target location without being eliminated by the defending team. Morrison watched from the observation deck as Maya disappeared into the maze. The SEALs had motion detectors and communication equipment, advantages that should have made the exercise heavily weighted in their favor. Maya had only her weapon, a tactical vest, and whatever skills she claimed to possess. The first few minutes passed in tense silence. Then suddenly, Operator Chen's voice crackled through the radio. Contact lost on the North Corridor. She's not where she should be. Morrison frowned, studying the monitors. Maya had indeed vanished from the expected route, somehow finding a path that avoided the motion sensors entirely. His men were experienced hunters, but they were being hunted now. Another voice came through. "This is Williams. I think I see movement on the second floor, but I can't get a clear shot. She's using the shadows like she was born in them." What happened next surprised everyone watching. Maya didn't just avoid the defenders. She systematically eliminated them one by one, using tactics that Morrison had seen employed by special forces units from various countries. She moved through the facility like smoke, appearing where she shouldn't be able to appear, striking from angles that should have been impossible. When the exercise ended, all 4 SEALs had been neutralized, and Maya had reached her objective with time to spare. The observation deck was completely silent as she emerged from the maze, barely breathing hard. "Well," Morrison said quietly, "that was unexpected." Harris was the first to speak when the team regrouped. "Ma'am, I have to ask, where exactly did you learn to move like that?" Maya was checking her equipment, making sure everything was properly secured. "Various places, Lieutenant. You pick things up when you work in different environments." But Morrison was studying her more carefully now. There had been something familiar about her movement patterns, something that triggered memories of missions he had undertaken in places that officially didn't exist on any government reports. The hand-to-hand combat evaluation was next, and Maya faced off against Peterson, who held black belts in 3 different martial arts. The fight was supposed to be a demonstration of technique and skill, not a real combat situation. But Peterson found himself working harder than he had expected. Maya's fighting style was a hybrid of techniques that Peterson couldn't quite identify. She moved with the fluid grace of someone trained in martial arts, but there was a brutality to her attacks that spoke of real combat experience. When she finally pinned him to the mat, Peterson was breathing hard and looking at her with newfound respect. "Where did you train?" he asked as she helped him to his feet. "Here and there," Maya replied. "You learn what works when your life depends on it." The tactical planning assessment was the final test, and this was where Morrison expected Maya to struggle. Planning complex operations required not just combat skills, but deep understanding of logistics, intelligence analysis, and team coordination. They presented her with a hypothetical mission scenario, extracting a high-value target from a fortified compound in hostile territory, with limited support and multiple contingency factors. Maya studied the materials for 20 minutes, then presented a plan that impressed even Morrison. She had identified weaknesses in the compound's defenses that his team had missed, proposed infiltration routes that minimized risk while maximizing effectiveness, and included contingency plans for various failure scenarios. More importantly, her plan showed intimate knowledge of the type of terrain and tactical situations they would face in Southeast Asia. "Rodriguez," Morrison said when she finished her presentation, "your plan is solid. Actually, it's better than solid. It's the kind of plan I'd expect from someone with extensive field experience in exactly this type of operation." Maya nodded. "Thank you, Commander. But I have questions. Your official record shows contractor work, but the techniques you've demonstrated today suggest military training, special forces training specifically. And not just any special forces. Some of the movements you used in the simulation were techniques I've only seen employed by very specific units." The room was quiet again. Maya looked around at the faces watching her, weighing how much to reveal. These men had earned the right to know who they might be working with, but there were certain truths that could complicate things significantly. "Commander, my background is complicated," she said finally. "I've worked with various military units in various capacities. Some of that work was official, some was not. Some of it appears in my file, some does not." Harris leaned forward. "What kind of unofficial work?" Maya hesitated. The kind that doesn't get talked about in official reports. Morrison studied her for a long moment. There was a story here. He could sense it. But he also understood that some stories came with security clearances and classification levels that made them impossible to discuss in open forums. "All right," he said. "You've proven you can do the job. But if we're going to work together, my team needs to trust you completely. In our line of work, trust isn't just about competence. It's about knowing that the person next to you will have your back no matter what happens." Maya nodded. "I understand that, Commander. Trust has to be earned." "It does," Morrison agreed. "And while your skills are impressive, skills alone aren't enough. We need to know who we're dealing with." The request was reasonable, and Maya knew it. These men would be putting their lives in her hands, just as she would be trusting them with hers. But explaining who she really was meant revealing a past that she had spent years trying to move beyond. "If I tell you my story," she said quietly, "it has to stay in this room. Some of it involves classified operations, and some of it involves people who are still active in various theaters of operation around the world." Morrison looked around at his team, reading the expressions on their faces. They were curious now, but also respectful. They understood the weight of classified information and the burden that came with certain types of knowledge. "This stays between us," Morrison said. "You have my word on that." Maya took a deep breath, then began to speak. "My father was a Marine, killed in action when I was 12. My mother remarried 2 years later to a man who turned out to be abusive. When I turned 18, I enlisted in the Army, partly to get away from home and partly to honor my father's memory." She paused, organizing her thoughts. "I excelled in basic training and was selected for advanced infantry training. From there, I was recruited into a special operations unit that doesn't officially exist. We conducted operations in places where American forces weren't supposed to be present." Harris whistled quietly. "Black Ops." Maya nodded. "For 6 years, I worked missions in Africa, South America, and Southeast Asia. We did everything from intelligence gathering to direct action operations to training local resistance fighters. The work was dangerous, and it was often morally ambiguous, but I believed we were making a difference." "What happened?" Morrison asked. Maya's expression darkened. "We were betrayed. Someone high up in the command structure was selling intelligence to hostile forces. My team was sent into what we thought was a routine extraction mission in Myanmar. Instead, we walked into an ambush." The room was completely silent now. Every man present had heard stories like this, but hearing it from someone who had lived through it was different. 8 men went in," Maya continued. 3 of us came out, and one of those 3 didn't make it past the hospital in Bangkok." She was quiet for a moment, lost in memories that clearly still caused her pain. "The official report listed all of us as killed in action. The surviving members of my unit were given new identities and quietly transferred out of the military. As far as the government is concerned, the woman who went into that jungle in Myanmar died there." Peterson spoke first. "So Maya Rodriguez is not your real name?" "No," she said. "Maya Rodriguez is a contractor with an impressive but unremarkable service record. The woman I used to be had a very different kind of record, one that can't exist if she's supposed to be dead." Morrison was beginning to understand. "But your skills, your knowledge of special operations tactics, your familiarity with Southeast Asian terrain, all of that comes from your real service record." "Yes," Maya confirmed. "After my official death, I spent 2 years recovering from injuries that don't appear in any medical records. When I was finally ready to work again, I discovered that my old unit commander, the man who had betrayed us, was still active and still selling intelligence. The government couldn't touch him without revealing the existence of operations that were supposed to be invisible." "So you went after him yourself," Harris said. Maya nodded slowly. "It took me 3 years to track him down and gather enough evidence to expose him. During that time, I worked as a private contractor, taking jobs that kept me in the regions where I was hunting him. I worked with resistance fighters in Myanmar, with anti-cartel forces in Colombia, with anti-terrorism units in the Philippines. I learned local tactics, local languages, local customs. Did you find him? Morrison asked. I found him, Maya said quietly. And I found something else. A network of corrupt officials and private contractors who had been profiting from selling American intelligence to the highest bidder. Taking down one man wasn't enough. The whole network had to be exposed. How did you manage that? Peterson asked. Carefully, Maya replied. It took 2 more years of gathering evidence, building cases, and finding people in the intelligence community who could be trusted with the information. Some of the people involved were very powerful, very well connected. Coming at them directly would have been suicide. Morrison was putting pieces together. The successful takedown of the Marquez cartel operation in Colombia 3 years ago, the exposure of the corruption scandal in the Pentagon contracting office, the mysterious disappearance of several high-ranking military officers who were later found to be selling classified information. That was all you. Maya didn't deny it. Among other things. And now you're back to working legitimate contracts, Harris observed. Now I'm trying to do work that actually helps people instead of just serving my own need for revenge, Maya corrected. The network is broken, the corrupt officials are either dead or in prison, and the intelligence leaks have been stopped. But there are still operations happening in places like Myanmar and the Philippines, operations where American forces might need someone who understands the terrain and the local political situation. Morrison stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the training yard where other SEAL teams were conducting exercises. Maya's story explained everything. Her skills, her knowledge, her reluctance to discuss her background. It also presented some complications. Rodriguez, what you're describing is essentially a 6-year vigilante operation against corrupt American officials and their foreign contacts. Even if your motives were pure, that kind of work exists in a very gray area legally. I know, Maya said. I also know that the work needed to be done, and I was the only person in a position to do it. Sometimes you have to choose between following the rules and doing what's right. And you think working with our team is the right thing to do now? Morrison asked. Maya considered the question carefully. Commander, I've spent the last 8 years working alone or with temporary allies. I've forgotten what it feels like to be part of a real team, to have people I can trust completely watching my back. If you'll have me, I'd like to remember what that feels like. Morrison turned back to face her. Your skills are undeniable, and your knowledge of the area we're going into could be invaluable. But working with a team means more than just tactical cooperation. It means being completely honest with the people you're working with. I understand, Maya said. Do you? Morrison challenged. Because what I'm hearing is that you've been living under a false identity for years, conducting unauthorized operations against American officials and working with foreign resistance groups that may or may not have interests aligned with American objectives. That's a lot of complications for someone who's supposed to be helping us complete a mission safely. The challenge hung in the air. Maya knew that Morrison was right to be concerned. Trust was a two-way street, and she was asking these men to trust her based on skills and partial truths. You're right to be cautious, Commander, she said. But let me ask you this. When you're in the field and things go wrong, do you want someone watching your back who follows orders blindly? Or do you want someone who has the experience and the judgment to adapt when the mission parameters change? Harris laughed, despite himself. She's got a point, Commander. Half our success comes from improvising when the original plan goes to hell. That's true, Morrison admitted. But improvisation requires trust, and trust requires transparency. Maya stood up, her decision made. You want transparency? Fine. But understand that some things can't be unseen once you've seen them. She turned her back to the group and began removing her tactical vest and shirt. Morrison was about to protest the inappropriateness of the situation when he saw what was revealed. Maya's back was a canvas of scars and tattoos that told a story more completely than any words could have. The scars were clearly from combat, bullet wounds, knife cuts, and what looked like shrapnel damage. But it was the tattoos that made Morrison's breath catch. Across her shoulders, in precise military script, were the names and dates of fallen comrades. Along her spine was a detailed map of Southeast Asian territories, with specific locations marked in symbols that Morrison recognized as military targeting coordinates. On her lower back was a unit insignia that Morrison knew belonged to a special operations group that officially didn't exist. But what made the entire room fall silent was the large tattoo that dominated the center of her back. It was a detailed reproduction of a photograph, 8 soldiers in combat gear standing in front of a helicopter in what was clearly a jungle setting. Below the image, in small but clear script, were 8 names. 5 of them had dates of death beside them. "Dear God," Peterson whispered. Maya put her shirt back on and turned to face them. "Those are my brothers," she said quietly. "The men who died because someone decided that selling American intelligence was more profitable than protecting American lives. Every scar on my back represents a mission where I trusted the wrong people or didn't have backup when I needed it. Every name represents someone I failed to save." Morrison was staring at her with a new understanding. "You carry their memory?" "I carry their mission," Maya corrected. "When they died, their work didn't end. Someone had to finish what they started." The room was silent for a long moment. Finally, Harris spoke up. "Ma'am, I don't know what unit you really served with, but I recognize dedication when I see it. Anyone who's willing to carry that kind of burden for 8 years has earned my respect." Morrison nodded slowly. "Rodriguez, your story raises as many questions as it answers, but I believe you're telling us the truth. And more importantly, I believe you're someone who understands what loyalty means." "So where does that leave us?" Maya asked. Morrison looked around at his team, reading their expressions. They had come into this evaluation skeptical of an unknown contractor. They were leaving with a respect for a warrior who had sacrificed everything to complete a mission that no one else could complete. "It leaves us with a teammate," Morrison said. "Someone who's proven she has the skills we need and the character we require. Welcome to the team, Rodriguez." Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in years. The relief of being accepted for who she really was, scars and all. "Thank you, Commander. I won't let you down." "I know you won't," Morrison replied, "because if there's one thing I've learned today, it's that you don't know how to quit." As the team prepared to leave the training facility, Morrison pulled Maya aside. "Rodriguez, I want you to know that your secret is safe with us, but I also want you to consider something." "What's that, Commander?" "You've been fighting alone for a long time, carrying burdens that no one should have to carry by themselves. Working with our team means you don't have to do that anymore. We watch each other's backs, and that includes carrying each other's burdens when necessary." Maya looked at him with surprise. In all her years of military service, both official and unofficial, no one had ever offered to share the weight of her responsibilities. "I appreciate that, Commander, but—" "No buts," Morrison interrupted. "You've proven you're one of us. That means your fight is our fight now. Whatever happens in Southeast Asia, you won't be facing it alone." For the first time in years, Maya felt the tight knot of isolation in her chest begin to loosen. She had spent so long being the lone wolf, the anonymous operative working in the shadows, that she had forgotten what it felt like to be part of something bigger than herself. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I'd forgotten what that felt like." Morrison smiled. "Stick around, Rodriguez. We'll remind you every day if we have to." As they walked out of the facility together, Maya realized that her mission had changed. For 8 years, she had been focused on completing tasks, eliminating threats, and honoring the dead. Now, for the first time since the ambush in Myanmar, she had living brothers to protect and a future to work toward. The scars on her back would always remind her of the price of betrayal and the weight of loss. But walking alongside these men who had accepted her completely, she began to understand that scars could also be reminders of survival, of strength, and of the bonds that form between people who have faced the darkness together. The mission in Southeast Asia would be dangerous. There would be challenges ahead that would test all of their skills and resolve. But Maya Rodriguez, the woman who had died in a jungle ambush and been reborn as a guardian of justice, was no longer facing those challenges alone. She had a team. She had brothers. And for the first time in 8 years, she had hope that the future might hold something more than just the completion of another mission. It might hold the chance to build something lasting, something worth protecting, something that honored both the memory of the fallen and the possibilities of the living.